One of the things that we've been working on like crazy in Builder's Business Black Belt is changing or addressing the issue of when people have a budget and it just doesn't align with the reality of what they can afford. And the issue with it is that they may have spoken to an architect or they just must have got an idea of what this is going to cost from somebody. But then they hook up with a builder and they ask the builder to price it. Now, don't get me started about free quotes and all of that sort of stuff. Somebody coming to ask a builder to put all of their time, their intellectual property, and their experience into a mini project to give somebody an idea of what something's going to cost, and then they want that for free. So, I mean, I just so disagree with that to start with. But in Builder's Business Black Belt, we've taught our builders a process that their customers absolutely love, and they are prepared to pay to get that proposal put together. So that was one challenge that we overcome through process. But another challenge is that even when the builder does the absolute right thing and prices things accurately, if that price doesn't match up with the expectation that the client had, the client blames the builder, and it's not the builder's fault. And so we've been looking for solutions to this issue for quite some time. A number of episodes we had a conversation with Richard Armstrong from ProCalc. I've got Richard again in this conversation because ProCalc provide a service, a process whereby they can very, very accurately price a project for a small amount of money, so you can invest a small amount of money and figure out whether we're on the right track. And the beauty of it, and the reason that I love it, like I'm a massive fan of this, is because it's a third party. It's taking the builder out of the equation, so they're not getting blamed for being too expensive, because the price is just the price, and the builder is putting together the price. And we've got to do something that prevents the builder from being blamed, but also prevents the client from spending a bunch of money getting things all priced up, only to find that they either can't afford it, the bank won't lend the money. There's all sorts of issues, and this process that Richard's business provides is a massive game changer, I think, to be able to eliminate this problem. So I've invited Richard back to the show, and today we're going to talk about that, but we're also going to be talking about why and how it's so important to become the trusted expert in your client's mind. So, Richard, welcome back to the Tool Shed. We had a fantastic conversation a number of weeks ago. We've been having lots of conversations outside of the podcast about this. We seem to have a very parallel thought process and passion about things that can be done to improve the building industry as a whole, improve the lot of the builder, improve the lot of the customer, the whole experience. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about here today. So thanks for coming back. In your opinion, why is it essential for a builder to become the trusted expert?
Oh, thanks for the intro, Mick. Thanks for having me back on too. Look, I think being a trusted expert, there's a big difference between that and being just another builder. That's really the main thing. So when you think about the way that clients engage in the whole construction process or the renovation or the extension or whatever their project is, what they're doing is that they're starting on a journey where it's a real learning curve for them. So they're, particularly if they've never done this kind of work before, so they've got, rightly so, 1,000,001 questions because they're dealing in a space that is foreign to them, it's new to them. So they are genuinely needing good advice and informed advice from the people that they deal with. So you've got that requirement from the client. The builder, what they're needing to do is actually illustrate that and showcase their expertise so they can actually say to the clients, look, this is the way that we work. And it helps the client distinguish between somebody who really knows their stuff versus someone who's, well, just another builder. And for the client, there's a huge distinction between the two, because an expert that they trust is someone that they can rely upon. They can tap into their knowledge. They can trust them to always be looking out for their best interests. Whereas just another builder, that's the builder that you get to quote against the trusted expert just to check the prices. And I've seen that happen many times over the years. And so I think if you were to put it into a nutshell, I think that's the key difference that builders face when they start engaging with a client.
Yeah. And I'd love your thoughts on this. My thoughts around a building project is it's a team event. Like you sort of look at see how it generally happens, and the client wants what they want. They're probably not all of that clear on what they want for a start, so they do need help with that. But I think that the perception is I've got the money and I'm employing you to do this, so I'm kind of making all of the decisions, and it just ends up badly. Like, it just doesn't work because they don't have the experience and the knowledge. And my approach to it is the best way to get the best experience for both the builder and the client is for both of them to bring what they need to bring to the party, and the client needs to bring clarity, and they need to bring openness and make sure that their builder understands what they're concerned about, what they are worried about, what their preferences are, all that sort of stuff, and then allow the builder to guide the process based on their experience that will give the client the closest to the possible outcome that they want. And I'm very carefully choosing my words here, because just because you want what you want doesn't mean you're going to get it if you can't afford it. So if you can get together with your builder, you can get as close to what you want in relation to what you can afford, and it's a happy experience. But to me, it's all about coming together as a team.
Yeah, absolutely. And if everybody is able to table their requirements, their expertise, their knowledge, their brief, and do that clearly, then it makes a massive difference. But Mickey, you just used a word that is really, really important in all of this, and that is openness. And so it's client openness.
Yeah.
And I think most of the people on this, that are listening to this, will have been in the experience where they will actually directly ask the client, and they should ask this, Mr. and Mrs. Client, what sort of budget are you looking at to spend on this? Now, what can often happen is that if there's not trust in place, if the client is feeling that they can't yet trust the builder, and they need to keep their powder dry, even if they've got a budget of $500K, they'll say, oh, $400K. And they'll dial down their budget. So they'll give the builder misleading information, which just makes things worse, because then the builder's looking at it going, well, this is nuts. There's no way they can do it for this much. And so it starts this slippery slope of the builder looking at it going, what a dire scenario this client's in. There's no way they'll be able to do what they need to do. And so it sort of devalues the whole process and throws it right off the rails from the beginning. So establishing trust and facilitating an openness both ways is massively powerful. Not just that it makes you the preferred builder, but it also means that, as you touched on, Mick, you really do finish up with a really tight, concise and deliverable or buildable brief, which is just crucial to getting a successful outcome for both the builder and the client.
Yeah. And that's why I'm a big fan of the whole ProCalc thing, because it just flushes out the truth. Like, it doesn't matter if they got 500 in the bank and then they're telling the builder 400. Like, none of that matters. It's like, let's get together and spend a few bucks, send this to Richard, get it priced. It's very accurate. It's basically the truth. Then there's no argument about, you're too expensive or this, that, or the other. It just is what it is. And then we can modify the approach to the project. If the budget doesn't come up to what you want, you can change it, or you can change the budget or whatever. But
yeah. Look, a little bit of daylight changes everything, doesn't it? If you can shine some daylight on the situation and take personal. Sorry, mate. Someone's sending a print job to my printer, which is sitting right next to me.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We just carry on. I've got painters at the front door. I'm passing out from the paint fumes.
Oh, sorry, mate. I just got distracted then. Can you bear with me? I'm just going to take this piece and give it to my son or daughter who's printed it out. I'll give it back to them and tell them not to print anymore. Is that okay?
Okay. And so we've sorted out the printer problem, and we're back, and we were talking about daylight makes a big difference.
Yeah. To
the problem.
That old expression, if you shine a little daylight on it, everything will be okay. And so really informing the process with good, clear, concise information just means that it keeps everybody in a safe place. It's no longer he said, she said, none of that stuff. That all goes out the window. Instead, the builder's actually able to stand and say, look, this is what the industry calculator says your job is worth. Let's work out where we go from here. And look, if it suggests that the price is going to be more than the client can afford, then it gives the builder the opportunity to sit down with the client and tease out the scope or reduce the scope, or the client might choose to go and find some additional funding or whatever the solution is. But it enables a way forward.
You've said building trust is important. I 100% agree. I mean, I just said it's a team sport. We've got to trust each other and work to each other's strengths and protect each other from our deficiencies. That's how a good team project works.
Yeah.
How do humans create trust? Like we were talking about this before we pressed the go button. Yeah. In your mind, how does that happen?
Look, I think if you look at there are quite a number of ways, and so there are some ways that are evolutionary. So, for example, you talk about you would have heard the expression social proof. Yeah. Now, there are other ways where we take small risks with a person or another party, and then if they come through on those, then we're prepared to take larger risks. But just as an example of social proof, and you can if you think back to when because Mick, you and I are old enough to know that we were around in these times. Think back to the caveman and his family. If he looks around and he sees the rest of his family running. Then he knows that he should run too. And that's probably because they're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger or a T-Rex or whatever. And so socially, humans have been hardwired and conditioned to observe social movements or social fear or action and respond to it. So the idea being that if another person does things in a particular way, you'll look at it and go, gee, that might be worth noting because they were in this situation and this is what they did. So that's why social proof is really important. And types of social proof include testimonials, videos, case studies, photographs of the builder's work, a whole variety of things that actually help prospective clients see what the builder does, see how they operate, and learn from that. So that's and it's something that is absolutely hardwired into the human brain. So that's one way that we learn to trust, or that we trust, or we get cues. The other way that we often do it is that we will indulge in a small transaction. And so, and they ramp up. So they'll start with anything as small as the builder says, I'll call you back at 10:15 this morning on the phone when the client first reaches out to them. So that very first trust exercise is that the builder calls at 10:15. If he calls at 10:15, then the client goes, okay, well, this guy sticks to his word on calling back at a time. So it's a low risk trust exercise for builder and client. As things step up, it might be that the builder says, look, I know of a design professional that I could introduce you to. They will be able to help you create a concept so that we know what we're all talking about then. And so then the client then says, all right, let's see, will I trust this? What's it going to cost me? A few $1,000s or whatever it is. And says, all right, let's give that a try. And so if that all works, then the client says, okay, that was a good positive experience. I can trust the builder's recommendations. And then the builder might say, all right, so look, now that we've got your concept, what we need to do is go through and do some costing exercises, and then that's going to cost X amount. And so it's a slightly larger spend. We'll have that back to you, Mr. and Mrs. Clients, in a number of days' time or a number of weeks, whatever the builder's current process is. When the builder goes ahead and does that and gets it back to them within that time frame, then again, the client has had the opportunity to test their trust with the builder. And so what happens over time is that the client trusts the builder more and more and more, and gets to see the way that they work. So keep in mind what we're talking about here is developing a system that isn't about tricking anybody. It's not about trying to trick people into trusting you. It's about illustrating to the client the way you work and how, as a result, they can trust you. And that's a really important journey in the way that the builders grow trust with their clients and help clients understand that the builders are working in their best interests.
Yeah, and having a process that you stick to, I think, creates a professional experience for the client as well. And I think that there's an interesting point that we need to make, and I'd love your thoughts on it, is that if the builder or the business has a process that they follow, that process might not absolutely fit the expectations or what the client is traditionally used to. And they may not even like it initially. But strangely enough, if the business sticks to their process and has the ability to communicate how this process benefits the customer, everything sort of falls into place. It works out really, really well because, number one, the customer thinks these people know what they're doing. They're professional. They stick to what they say, doing things like you said, being very specific about when you're going to call back, and calling back is a deposit in the emotional bank account. So you're building up this big bank account of good in the mind of your prospect, because there will be a time when you need to make a withdrawal and it's out of your control, like weather or something turning up late or whatever. If there's a big balance in the emotional bank account and a withdrawal happens, you've still got a balance. You're not overdrawn, and that's really important. But the example or the experience that I was thinking about as you were mentioning this was some years ago. We were refinancing a home, and somebody that I knew what owned a mortgage broking company. So I called him and he said, yeah, come in, we'll do the appointment, I was in the waiting room, and Patch is his name. He walked past and I sort of went to get up out of the chair, and he said, no, I've organised an appointment with somebody else. And initially my thoughts and my emotions were, he's fobbing me off to somebody else. I wanted to speak to the boss, But he stopped and he turned around and he basically said, I've organised this appointment with this other guy. He's somebody we've just recently brought into the team. He's an absolute gun. He can do everything significantly better than I ever could. And I wanted to make sure that you were looked after the best we possibly could. So that's what I've arranged. He'll be talking to you shortly. And I've gone, phew.
Yeah.
And it's like, they've got a process. They've got my best interest at heart, and that's why they're doing this rather than, just fobbing me off. And I think that builders need to have a process, that they need to stick to it. This is how we do the proposal. This is what's required. We don't step away from this process, because by stepping away from it introduces the opportunity for you to have a lesser quality experience. And we know if we follow our process, it gives us the best chance of giving you the best value and the best experience. So we will not move away from our process. I think that's a really great way to position it.
I think that's massive. And you and I have talked about this before, Mick. I have a belief that if the builder doesn't have a process, I'll call it, for want of a better word, I'll call it a selling process, or let's call it an engagement process. So the builder needs to have an engagement process, and that's really, really important, because if the builder doesn't have that, then what it does is it allows the client to impose their process, their buying process, upon the builder.
Yeah.
And guess what? The client hasn't got one.
It's a crappy process.
It's like, oh, how much does this cost? That's their process.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's massive for a builder to have a robust and mature process. And it was really interesting, just in that example you were using, Mick, about where you're getting up out of your chair, and your mate says, no, not yet. The way that a builder can avoid that slight emotional moment is to actually, before they even meet with the client, is to actually send the client an information pack that outlines the process. So and again, this is entirely about building trust, entirely about being transparent with clients about the way you run your business and the way that you engage with clients. And it might be just a one-page infographic that is professionally put together. And what you do is you step through the process of engagement, be it design development, be it preliminaries, be it tendering for or not tendering, but actually pricing the job, and then finally going ahead and forming contract and then delivering the project. And so actually outlining a robust and mature process for clients actually tells them exactly what you're going to do, so they can look at it and say, all right, these guys know what they're going to do before we've even met them. And so and what that does is it informs the client about the steps that they're going to go through. So it helps them build trust, but it also means that any emotional anxiety they have about what's going to happen when is actually answered. And so it's answered in a documented format, in a graphical format. So the builder's not taking phone calls at 8 p.m. at night from the client going, oh, what's happening with town planning, or what's happening with, why isn't the building inspection being done, or what's going on, all that sort of stuff. No builder needs that in their life, and no client needs that in their life either. So actually putting together an info pack for clients that explains all of this. It might be a Q&A pack. There's an infographic in it that shows the whole process. Then what that does is it reduces time from the builder, and it reduces anxiety from the client. And that then leads on to further referrals down the track, which then feeds into the social proof thing that I was talking about before. So it's like this self-fulfilling wheel. If you operate in a way that builds trust, it's almost like paying trust forward to the next client for referrals.
Yeah. You mentioned in a message to me about this topic that we're talking about, active listening and empathy. And I want your thoughts on that in a moment. But I suspect that when we started to talk about, how to become a trusted expert, there'll be people listening to that and go, yep, that's what I need to do. I need to position myself as the expert, so I'm trusted and I can hold their hand, I can guide them, I can protect them, I can support them. Everything's done for all of the right reasons. Where I suggest or suspect this will probably come undone for most people is because the school system, the education system is so shithouse at teaching people how to communicate properly that most people think that how I become the trusted expert is talk my head off and bludgeon people into submission to experience I have all of this knowledge. And it's around about the opposite of that. There's an old sales saying that says people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I think that is at the essence of what I'm thinking that you're talking about, is that it's important to develop active listening techniques and have empathy. So tell us your thoughts around that. What is empathy? What is active listening? Why is it so important for a builder of all people? Like, we're not therapists. Why do we need to have empathy and learn an active listening skill or an empathic listening skill?
Yeah. Look, I'm wondering if we can go even one step back before that.
Sure.
And you touched on this in your question, and that is that builders are natural problem solvers.
Yeah.
Builders rarely are natural salesmen. And so, and it's really interesting. And the whole, we all have the fear of being pigeonholed as a shiny suit sort of salesman. None of us really want to be. We don't want to be that. No. But the most constructive way to engage with a client rather than selling to them is to really have a focus of solving their problems.
Yeah.
And listening to their problems, and really what that does is it means that you're no longer, as you touched on, that you're no longer just pushing messages down the client's throat. You're actually listening to their problems and developing ways to solve their problems. And so, active listening with empathy is a really important step in doing that. So for example, if a client says to you, oh, look, I talked to a builder and they said that it was going to cost me $1 million more than I expected. Then an unlistening builder would go, oh, well, that's just an outrageous price. We can do better than that. Okay. An active listener would say, oh, $1 million, that's a lot of money, isn't it? It's I can understand that would have been a real shock to you. And then the client says, oh, yeah, and look, you know what? And I didn't like his attitude either. You know what I thought? So what it does is it gives the client license to explain their situation, and the client then understands that you, the builder, really care about their situation because you're showing empathy for their situation. And it's a great listening skill. It's a great skill to have. Whether you're talking with your clients, your children, your partner, whoever, but being able to recognize their pain and talk about their pain with them is key, so that you can actually convey how well you understand that person's pain.
Yeah. I've just noticed that you've frozen in time, but we can still hear you okay, so that's okay. But fortunately, when the video stopped and it wasn't some really weird looking thumbnail like when sometimes people's video freezes. There's this, their tongue's hanging out and one nostril's bigger than the other and all of that. But it's not a bad looking shot, and I'm sure it'll come back soon.
Yes.
I think that really important to just add a little bit to that, and I don't want this to become a workshop, but I think this is important, that what you're saying is that the key is to understand your prospect or your client. But I think that it can be an issue if the listener, the builder in this case, assumes that they understand. So something that we talk about all the time when we're doing our workshops and so forth in Black Belt is that you need to be listening for what we call the context, which is the emotion that they're speaking to you with. So when you were talking about, the builder charged me $1 million more than I thought, you're observing to look at what emotion the person is delivering that information. The content is, they said it's $1 million more than I thought that I was going to have to pay. That's the information. The context is the emotion. So, you were really surprised, or you were disappointed, or you were angry, or whatever. But then the third part is getting confirmation that that person that you're listening to believes that you understand from their perspective. So we call it the context, the emotion. The content is the information, and the confirmation is getting confirmation from your the person that you're listening to. And I think that's super important.
So yeah, look, you're absolutely right. It really is a case of always reassuring the client that you've heard what they say, that you're on the you understand what they need, and therefore if you they then know that if you understand what they need, then you're actually going to be able to tailor a solution that will help them. Because fundamentally, when they come to you with a lot of these questions or these pain points, they're calling out for help. And so if you can show them that you're in good hands, that they're in trusted hands, then it means that they then become far more open with you and far more honest with you about the way that about what they want and about what their budget is and all that sort of thing. It's very easy to be cynical as a buyer, and what's the old as a builder rather. What's the real estate's expression? Real estate agents'
buyers
expression?
are liars.
Buyers are liars. That's it. Yeah, and I must admit there are times when I've walked out of a client consultation and I've thought to myself, I'm sure that they misled me then on their budget. I think that you just get a vibe from them that they're not being overly open with you, and really what that comes back to is building trust with them as early as you possibly can. So actually setting up systems that will enable you to grow trust with them before you even meet with them.
Yeah, I think that the empathy word that you were talking about before is really critical here, because it's like, not to get too technical, but people who, if you've ever heard the Abraham or know about the Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of human needs, the pyramid starts off with the bottom two levels that are physiological needs, like, and in its most basic form, like the bottom line is we need to be able to breathe, and then the next level up is safety, and it's basically saying that if you can't breathe, you're not overly interested in safety. Like you will punch the window and potentially cut yourself to be able to breathe again. We do crazy things. We don't think straight when we can't breathe. And then what Abraham Maslow is talking about, that once those physiological needs are satisfied, we can breathe, we've got something to eat, we've got shelter, and we feel safe. Then we move into psychological needs, and the being understood is kind of the fundamental psychological need that's the equivalent to air. It's like being understood is the psychological equivalent to air. And in you being the builder, and I know this is very, very deep when we're talking about builders and trades-based businesses, but like it makes a power of difference when your prospect takes that breath, because they're psychologically suffocating. We don't know what to do. We're overwhelmed. There's all of this stuff. We don't know who to trust, all of this. And then they meet you and you give them that psychological air by understanding their problems from their perspective, maybe not even offering any solutions at this stage, and they go, and they can breathe, and then there is this trust, and then they go, Richard, what do you suggest?
Yeah, spot on. And look, you're right, it is deep, but it's deep for good reason, because they're about to spend 500 grand, $1 million, whatever. They're going to spend a lot of money with you. So it should be deep. You know, it's you don't grow a robust relationship where somebody's going to spend, you know, it's probably the biggest spend they ever make. You don't grow a robust relationship like that, you know, in a couple of sessions. You actually have to really illustrate that you've got a system, that you understand them, that you listen closely, that you completely get their brief, and that you're not going to leave them, you know, out on a limb. You're actually able to, because you understand their requirements and their needs, you're actually able to hold their hand all the way through the process and support them really, really well. You know, keep in mind, you as a builder, you are messing with someone's nest, and so you're making massive change and massive disruption to their nest. And when you do that, it can be a really, you know, invasive experience for the client. It is. And so they need to trust you.
I mean, would it be fair to say that the huge majority of problems that are experienced by builders in a building project, and obviously experienced by the customer as well, is due to shit communication? Like just really bad communication. Would it be possible to fix many, many problems by just elevating your commitment and your skill level and focus on communication? Would that be fair to say?
Spot on. And when you use technical terms like shit communication, I understand. But look,
use the right words.
Yeah, but look, I mean, I'm thinking back to a builder that it was back about 5 years ago, and this guy was the worst communicator I've ever come across. He was shocking. He was also a really good builder, and it was amazing. So I'd look at his work and I'd look at it and go, gee, that work is outstanding. That's, you know, I couldn't do that myself. I reckon I'm really impressed with that. But he was an awful communicator, and the way that came through to the client was that this poor builder, he was charging less than everybody else. So what was happening was that he was terrible with he was gruff. He didn't outline his process to clients in advance. He didn't look to support the client and empathize with them in any way. And so the result was, the way that he dealt with that historically was by lowering his price, because he was missing out on jobs. Now, if we were to flip that round and he were to be a really active listener, a really good communicator, where he actually sent out an information pack and an infographic about the client process that they go through, that he had an online communication system that enabled clients to liaise with him throughout the project, it would completely revolutionise his pricing structure. And it's funny that we've sort of gone from a really soft skill from empathy to a hard skill, which is pricing. But he would be able to charge, I know he would be able to charge 20, 30% more if he improved his communication skills. So yeah, you're absolutely right. If you can fine tune your communication skills, it makes you far more attractive as a builder if you are in a competitive situation. But as well as that, if you're a good communicator, clients are less likely to create a competitive tender anyway. They're more likely to say, no, look, we know, excuse me, they're more likely to say, look, I know we can trust this guy. He's done a great job so far. He's been a good communicator. I don't think we need to worry about reaching out to other builders, or if we do, we're just going to make sure that we're in a sensible price range. Now, what that means is that the builder who is a good communicator is then in the box seat to charge the highest price.
Am I meant to respond to that? I mean, I agree. I'm just sort of mesmerised with what you were saying, going, yep, yeah. And it's so true. And like, I just wanted to say before we wind up that if you're out there listening to this and you're a builder, please don't think, at least from my perspective, I can't speak for Richard, but I'm not bashing builders. Like, I'm here to support you. And we're using these examples of, that particular builder. And I can just imagine some builders hearing this message and go, mate, I haven't got time for that shit. I got houses to build. And it's like, yeah, but the reason why you haven't got the time is because there is a whole bunch of problems that you have to deal with when you're managing your projects that have been created through poor system, poor process, poor communication. And if you invest some time every day and every week in refining the systems, the processes, your communication skills, it eliminates these problems out of your business in the future permanently. And you don't ever have to deal with them anymore. I mean, it's something that we do every Monday in Black Belt. We have a session with all of the members called Win the Week. And the whole purpose of it is, what is the one thing this week that you are committed to that is what we call a multiplier activity? And what that is it's something that you're doing in your business that is going to return you a return on the investment of time and effort ad infinitum. It's going to continue to give you value into the future. And we need to do one of those every week at bare minimum, a multiplier activity. So if you did something to improve your process, to improve your procedure, to improve your communication skills every week, in a year's time, you'd have like 40 or 50 improvements that you've made to your business that will continue to return value to you for the rest of your business life. And so please, guys, understand that we're not bashing you. We're hopefully trying to support you and encourage you to do things that are going to make a big difference to you in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think one of the ways that one of the easiest ways for builders to introduce system and introduce we'll call it a system that builds their profile as a trusted expert. It's often with costs. So being able to say to the client up front, this is what we believe your job is going to cost, and actually saying to the client, look, we're not we're comfortable that this is the likely price range. And we're not going to come back to you further down the track and say, and with a whole lot of add-ons. And actually saying that overtly to the client makes a huge difference, because if a client feels as though they're not getting full information up front, they obviously find it hard to trust. And we've all come across suppliers, be it whether it's a trade or a builder or an accountant or a whoever, it doesn't really matter. But we've all come across those operators who say, "Oh yeah, it's going to cost you $1,000," and so you go, "Oh, that's a really good price because everybody else said $3,000. That's really good. I'll get on board with this guy." Yep. And so anyway, you sign up with them, and then a couple of weeks in, they say, "Oh, look, and don't forget, we also need to factor in this sort of thing, and that's another $800." You go, "Oh, hang on, but didn't we? No." Right, okay, it's going to cost $1,800. Right, okay. And then a few weeks down the track, you're motoring along and they say, don't forget, there's something else. To get a really good outcome, what you need is this. And it's going to cost you another $1,500. You're like, oh, geez, okay. So all of a sudden, you've gone beyond you're up to $3,200 now. You've blown, or $3,300. You've blown all your money, and it would have been cheaper to go with one of the other blokes.
Yeah.
And so most people in life have all experienced that, and it's really horrible. So, as a builder, if you're able to say, and I've always tried to do this whenever I've met with clients in the past, I will say to them, look, the pricing or the price guide that we're providing to you is all inclusive, because we don't want to create surprises for you down the track. We are being as transparent as we possibly can be, because we want to make sure that you don't get a nasty kicker halfway through the job. You need to be up to speed. And what that does, it does a couple of things. One is it positions you as being completely transparent and honest, but also if another builder comes in with a price that is much lower than yours, it makes the client look at it and say, I need to understand more about why this builder is less than the first builder. And so it shifts the client's thinking from about price to quality and what they're going to get for that price. And it's a really powerful tool for both the client and for the builder.
Yeah, could not agree more. We've fundamentally run out of time for this conversation, but I wanted to thank you for jumping on and sharing that. There's a couple of other topics that hopefully we'll be able to get you back again. Intangibles builders should be pricing for is a really interesting conversation, because there's a lot of information in there that I expect that builders just don't think about, and it could make them more money and save them a bit of pain. So that'll be an interesting conversation, and also the margins, talking about margins. What are the correct margins, and what is a margin, and what is a markup, and what is net profit, and what's the difference, and we need to be understanding all of that, because the confusion about it costs builders money and unnecessarily. So hopefully we'll be back again on another episode of this here podcast, talking about one or both of those topics in the future. But just wanted to thank you for jumping on again, second time. You'll probably be the first for the third, coming back talking about it again. But just appreciate everything you're doing. As you're probably aware, listener, that ProCalc is sponsoring the podcast as you're listening to it. And the reason for that is, as I said at the start, I just really feel that myself and Richard, I think that you have a genuine desire to contribute to the betterment of the industry, and it's just wonderful to have your support.
No, that's great. Thanks, Mick. Yeah, look, running a building business is hard. I've done it myself, and I know the challenges that it presents. So any opportunity to improve the way that builders work and to make things easier for the builder and for the client, for that matter, is just super important. So thank you so much. Really appreciate being on the call. Thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Wicked. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Toolshed podcast. I think there's a lot of value in it. It will be worth rewinding. I know I sound like an old audio engineer saying rewinding. I know you don't rewind anymore. It's not tape, it's digital. I understand that. But go back and listen to some of those points again and start to look at ways that you can improve particularly your communication skills. There's some great resources out there. The book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, is a great resource for that. You don't need to read the whole book. Go straight to Habit 5. It says first seek to understand, then to be understood. That's the essence of what we were talking about. It's a wonderful, wonderful resource. It will help you with not only your prospects, but your clients, your team members, your suppliers, your subcontractors, everybody that's involved in your project. These ideas will be able to help. So I hope you found that interesting. I hope you found it valuable. We'll be back again with another Toolshed, an episode of the Toolshed podcast before you know it. But I'm Mick Hawes from Builders Business Black Belt. That is all from us in this edition of the Toolshed podcast. We'll be back again soon.